I'm not on yet. There we go. We've reached the magic hour of 6:30, and we have a couple of people who will not be joining us tonight, or may join late. Taylor is attending by Zoom. Ashley may or may not be able to join remotely, and Councillor Jordison is also not able to be here tonight. She had a family matter that she needed to be there for. And so with that, I will call us to order. And I'd like to acknowledge with the utmost respect that we are meeting on the traditional territories of the Lekwungen speaking people. And we're honored to have the opportunity to build strong working relationships with the people of the Songhees and Kosepsum nations. And I would like to, just before we pull our meeting to order here completely with our agenda, I'd like to introduce our new Chief Administrative Officer, Jason Johnson. Do you want to say anything? That's a good one. A good hello. All right, looking to approve our agenda for tonight. Could I get an approval? Stuart? Moving the agenda? No? Okay, go ahead, Stuart. Oh, sorry, that's me. Forgot. I've gotten lazy.
I was going to ask for my usual update on what's happening on the sustainable infrastructure plan and I guess the master transportation plan. And also wondering whether we should have a discussion as a committee, what we're doing and how we're doing it and what we think we should do. So I would like to add those 3 items to the agenda.
Okay. Do we need to add those as official items or how do you think we should proceed?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we can add them as agenda items, that would be appreciated, but I didn't catch all of what you said.
So the 3 things is an update on the sustainable infrastructure plan, update on the master transportation plan that we talked about the last meeting, and then just the sort of, I guess, a value proposition of how we're doing as a committee and what we could do to be more effective.
Okay. And I'll go to Roger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know what the procedure is, but at some point we'll be asked to accept the minutes of the previous 2 meetings. And unfortunately, on the minutes of one is a motion.
Can I just stop you for 1 sec? Can we talk about that when we get to that? That's item 3.1 on the agenda. So
Yeah, that's fine. I just didn't know when to introduce it.
okay, yep, at 3.1, I'll come to you for that. I thought maybe you were going to talk about the items proposed to be added to the agenda. Nope. Any discussion at all? Nope. All right, seeing no further comments on that, I'm happy to add those 3 things to the agenda. Can we add them after the, where do they fit best, Marcy? I think we've got to do the minutes first. And then public participation, and then we'll add our 3 items as those are old business, and then have our new business. Does that seem appropriate?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, perfect. So with those additions to the agenda, I'm looking for an approval as amended. Is anyone opposed? Nope. And do you want to? All right, moving along, then we are approved and we're on to the minutes. Roger, go ahead.
Thank you. Anyway, before we look at the minutes for approval, there is a motion. It was almost an omnibill of recommendations to council, and I don't totally agree with everything that's in that motion or the way it's worded. So I'd like to have a discussion on some of the items that were included in that motion.
Okay. So I was thinking about that in advance of this meeting as well. And I think that we made that motion at a time when we hadn't really been asked to put anything forward. Council had not given us direction to give direction, if you will. So, and all of the things that we are talking about in that motion are going to come back to this committee in the near future. So would you like to simply rescind that motion? Because it was a very complicated motion and a very complicated meeting. And rather than giving the wrong impression going forward, I think it was probably a good process in a way, in that it kind of identifies some of the things we're trying to grapple with. But at the same time, I don't think maybe it's as complete as we would like it to be, and we could probably do a better job bringing something tighter and more concise forward as we're empowered to give a response by council.
Okay, I move to rescind the motion of October 22nd until such time as we can do further study on it.
Okay, and that is the last one, right? The, that I move, that we recommend the council prioritize corridor along Souk, and then we went on talking about Sangster. That's the
Correct.
motion we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I have a motion to rescind. Any discussion? Okay, no seconder at committee, but that's great. Anyone opposed to that? Not seeing any, and I don't see any hands. So that is rescinded. And then I'm looking for a motion to adopt the minutes minus that motion.
I move adoption of the minutes.
And that
Minus
is,
that motion.
yeah, so that's the October 22nd. There's also, no, there isn't. Yes. No, that's it. There's a
No, there's
November-
two.
There's
two
November
motions.
13th.
November 13th.
Yeah. And is there the November? I've only got the 22nd in front of me.
Here since.
Attached to the agenda, Madam Chair, is also November 13th, Special Infrastructure Committee minutes.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. I think that's all in order. Is everyone happy with those as well? Okay, perfect. Then we are good to go. No one is opposed, correct? Okay, perfect. Minutes are dealt with.
Do you need a mover for that one?
No, I will accept that you move
Okay.
both. All right, we have no public participation because we have no public. So we will move on to our three items that are under old business. Marcy, sorry, remind me, what was the first one?
Thank you. The first one was Sustainable Infrastructure Plan.
Yeah, that's the one. Jason, it's my understanding that that is waiting for the final touches from finance as the lead on the sustainable infrastructure plan. Maybe Josh has an update for us when that might be coming.
Yeah, you're correct, Madam Chair. I have checked in with our Director of Finance, and the update that we gave you last time has not changed. Their priorities have been elsewhere with other work, namely the financial plan and getting that across the board, grant and aid, other works. It's not been lost, but it is not top of priority currently.
Yeah, so finance is still working on it, but we did just approve last night the 5-year financial plan. So the budget is complete now, and we're moving on to our next step is getting the grant and aids organized for how those will come forward. I would imagine the capital plan will be coming back in the not too distant future. Any comments from anyone? Stuart.
It's part of my overall frustration that, this is the third meeting in a row where we haven't received stuff. We had a start on a discussion of a fairly complex topic, the sustainable infrastructure plan. And we got so far, and then we had to wait for council to see what we said, and then they said, yeah, you can ask those questions, and then we asked the next meeting where it was, and the meeting after where it was. Now the third meeting, where is it? There doesn't seem to be a priority on a fairly meaningful piece of legislation. You know, it's just part of the frustration. Why are we here? What are we trying to do? You know, we start and have a nice chat about things, and then it just goes in the vapor. And so that's, I guess, all I can do is keep asking.
Okay, thank you, Stuart.
If I-
Josh?
If I may, through the chair, I should have elaborated a little bit more. Your recommendations from this committee did go to council. Council, I don't have the resolution in front of me. I could come back to that, but the minutes from that meeting, there are portions, if not all of those recommendations, were taken by council and gifted back to staff. There was direction given. It's now with staff to work with the consultant group and internally to look at those recommendations, implement them into the plan, and bring them back. So it's not that council hasn't seen it or worked through it, or that we haven't progressed it to council or back to this committee. We're in that limbo period. And finite resources has meant that it has not returned to that consultant group and been pushed forward with the asks from this committee. Now, the list of those asks, and Madam Chair, I can maybe circle back with you at a later date to find those minutes, and we can get the specifics of which recommendations were brought, or I guess taken by council and given back to staff as direction. That's something we could look to bring back.
Okay, thank you.
I don't want to belabor this or argue it, but my recollection of going back, might be almost a year now, I don't know when we actually discussed this, was we discussed it, we had a bunch of thoughts. We were looking for a chance to discuss it again, you know, to really get to the meat of it. And yes, it went to council, and I think council did look at, I think all we had was a request to look at it again or something, not much more than that. And we've got nowhere. And you know, it's, I think, a fairly good committee. You know, I think the discussions we've had around this table have been very, very good and well thought out. But you know, frankly, you bring us back tomorrow, what we asked for a year ago, and we all forget why we asked and where it was. We've just lost the momentum. And I think that's unfortunate.
Okay, go ahead.
If I may, again, not to take too much time tonight. Through the chair, Stuart, you're not wrong. What came to council, I believe, was a request for, I think we had a 100-year plan, and you had put forward a request for a 50 or even maybe a 25, if I recall. That is what the consultant is working back, because we don't have a discussion point without those interim pieces. And that was the piece that I think this committee wanted to chew on, was what if we had a 50-year outlook or a 25-year outlook? I don't remember the points, but that's what the consultant group is going to work on.
Which kind of adds to my frustration, because we were sitting here talking about, we had in front of us a 100-year sustainable infrastructure plan. And the question was, in a small community like ours, it has an infrastructure deficit to begin with. Should we be looking at the 100-year plan, or would it make sense to start with a 50-year plan, let it run for 5 years, get it started, have a 50-year plan after that? So we were just in the, you know, should it be 50, should it be 100, pros and cons discussion. And we would have had a better input for council to bring that back and chat it through a little bit more and maybe come amongst ourselves to a conclusion instead of going off and hiring a consultant to run a bunch more numbers. So that's, again, pardon my frustration.
Roger.
If I can recall, actually, we even considered a 25-year plan, because who can say for sure what's going to happen 25 years from now? That's a long time. A lot of things change. And you look what's happened in the last 10 years, as an example, Royal Bay, who can envision that 25 years ago? Nobody. So I think, to be realistic, we've got to bring that down to a realistic timeline so we can actually say this might or might not have an impact. Because unless you have a crystal ball, nobody's going to be able to say what's going to happen 50 years from now.
I hear your frustration, but I'll just caution a little bit that a lot of the reasons why it's a 100-year plan is that some of our infrastructure lasts 100 years. So we don't want to miss things that are that time frame in terms of saving money for their eventual replacement when they wear out. So I do understand why we have this big long-term plan, but I also understand the shorter term plan too. But I think we have to walk before we can run. And I think the 100-year was probably in some ways the easier plan to look at because we have more time and a lot of the infrastructure is of that age. And I think you're right. We don't know exactly how the community is going to change, but our plan can change as that becomes more clear. So I share your frustration and I understand we just got into something and it's kind of fallen off the edge of the cliff, as it were. But I think your feedback has been heard and I think we will get there. All right. Anything else on that? Just checking in with Taylor, who's there. All right. Then we'll move on. The next item, Marcy, was
The master transportation plan.
right. And that is a work in progress. Josh, do you want to speak to that first and then we'll come to the committee?
Through the chair, I may actually recommend we swap the order and talk about the committee structure and effectiveness, because I think that comes into play with the TMP and how this committee might see it come back, and staff's process with that moving forward, if I could request that.
Sure, absolutely. Let's just table that for a minute and talk about our committee structure. Jason, do you want to speak to that one?
Yeah, you bet. This is one of the items that council's asked me to look at is the committee structure, what's working, what's not working. You know, I've heard the frustration outside of this committee, just in terms of how matters come onto the agenda. And what I look at for authorization of committees is how is it supposed to function? And the terms of reference are quite clear. It's matters referred by council, right? So those matters would come in front of council. Council would then refer it to committee for their input before any further advancement of a plan, whether it's the TMP, whether it's a stormwater master plan. Council would refer those matters. And I think what's happened is we need to tighten up our ability to refer matters to committee. And so what I've asked staff to do is look at all of our work plans for 2025 and identify which of those items should be referred to committee by council. So then that way your mandate is meeting what the terms of reference are, because the authority of the committee is their role is to review, comment, and make recommendations to council on issues referred to the committee by council. So given that that's the terms of reference that were initiated by council, we need to bring forward what those plans look like so you can see when those plans will be referred to you based on the work plans that we have. And it's referred early on, so it's not something where, you know, we're in the final stages of a plan and then we refer it to committee and then it gets sent back out again. So we need to tighten up those processes, and that's something that I'm working on right now with council, with the committees. With this agenda, we had the opportunity to meet with the chair, talk about those items that were coming forward, to talk about the terms of reference. And our intentional piece is to make sure that the chair has an opportunity to make sure that the agenda is reflective of what's been referred to it by committee. And that's one of the areas that we'll be focusing on to give the committee the meat of the things that were considered in the terms of reference. So I hope that helps. There's some work that we need to do on our side that we're doing in the background so that you're aware of those items that will be coming to you in 2025 from council.
And I could just add that where we're at right now is still unfortunately in the baby steps process of trying to, staff are trying to give us information to just make us generally understanding the systems and situations that we're in. Stuart.
So, that's great. Let's have a nice process and let's button it down. The reality is, from what we've seen on this committee so far, is that wrapping our heads around the issues, and I think there was the four major ones that council wanted us to look at, takes more than a meeting. And we're stymied by the political processes that say, okay, you have a meeting, we'll get some minutes made up, we'll give the minutes to council to look at, or maybe we have to approve them here and then the council looks at them. But it's a very slow and cumbersome process. And as I mentioned before, we lose track. None of us remember what we were thinking about on the sustainable infrastructure many months ago. So, we should dive into it deeply to be able to provide council the input that's useful to them. But we don't seem to be able to get that done in one meeting. And then once that meeting's over, it vaporizes, it goes into outer space. I mean, really doesn't come back here. And so we're not doing anything productive. So as you review what these committees should and shouldn't do and how they do it, I think that's one thing. I mean, we should be able to go, okay, we've yacked about this for 3 hours. It's 10 o'clock. We're all beat. Let's just come back and carry on instead of having to go through let's get some minutes. Let's get them to council. Let's see if council wants us to talk about it some more or not. So we're just not providing the value that I think this committee is capable of providing. I think we've got some sharp people on here and some good balance of knowledge. So that's my frustration, as you may have picked up on already. Sorry to go on.
Anyone else want to weigh in? Jason?
I can't speak to the history and how we got here and the frustrations and currently where we're at. I guess what I'm saying is that we have some internal processes that we have to look at and be much clearer with intention. Refer to committee, here's the timeline. Then the timeline that it comes back to council so you can see how that feedback gets brought into the decision-making matrix. And I think we have to do a better job of just ensuring here's where we're at the process, here's what the complete plan looks like, here's what it looks like all the way to adoption, so you can see the timeline and understand that things don't get into the vapor or ether or whatever we want to call it, that it is actually valuable. And what I've heard from council is committees are valuable. Like, that's why council struck them. From our perspective, there's some things that we need to sort out. And I think part of that is having that referral process from council, having a better understanding of how the project fits, where that approval process is, so that the committee knows that their input is valued, where it gets heard by council, and what that means for the overall project. And that's what we're working on, so that the committee does feel valued. Because what I can tell you is, from the council members I speak to, from the mayor, these are a valuable resource, and we want to make sure that you feel valued from the time that you're putting in, because we're asking you to provide value on the plans that we're providing to council. And I can tell you, in the time that I've been here since January, council will often ask that, should this be referred to committee? So we need to internalize that process and make sure that things aren't being put onto an agenda to fill the space, right? Because that doesn't solve anybody. It just feels like you're having a meeting for a meeting, and that's not the intentional piece behind it. Give us a little bit of time to get this sorted out. We've got this report that will be coming to council. Then I think it's going to be a lot clearer for what the next year looks like and the value that the committee will add to the various projects that we have in 2025.
And Jason, when we get to those meaty issues, and I realize that the sustainable infrastructure plan is one that we tackled early in hopes that it would be ready, and then there's been, for reasons that are possibly predictable, but we're always trying to hope for the best and plan for the worst. But when we get something that is meaty and weighty, including the transportation master plan, also takes a lot of time. What I heard Stuart mention is that perhaps one meeting is not enough for us to deal with that in a reasonable fashion. Sometimes we need a little time. Maybe we could come back and continue that same meeting with giving a little more time and have a night to think about it. So I guess I'm looking at, are we meeting often enough or, you know, could we maybe extend to additional timeframes for the committee to not be quite so under pressure, like nothing, everything all at once, nothing, everything all at once, kind of is how it's felt to me. So is that a possibility, and is that something we could look at as a way to deal with those issues that are bigger and heavier?
And that's the piece that we're bringing forward to council. Here are the items that will be referred to committee. Here's the timeline that we've got for that project, so that we can appropriately space that, so that the meetings, as they're properly constituted under the terms of reference, that you'll meet 4 times a year, right? And it specifically states the timelines. Given our process to council, we have to look at the totality of the project and make sure that we're have enough time to refer that to committee in conjunction with what the overall timeline for the program or plan is. So you will see early on in your mandate what items are coming up in 2025. So it's very clear as to when the committee's input is there. I think one of the other things that we may want to look at is standing items. So council or the committee referred this back to council. Here was the feedback, and staff can give you the update as to when that went to council, if it's been delayed, why it's been delayed, so that the committee is aware of when it will be referred back to council, because this committee provides valuable input to council before they make decisions. So we want to make sure that that's all tied up in a proper bow. And we're working towards good governance practices with that. And I think that that will be very helpful for not only this committee, but all of the committees of council.
So is that yes to being able to advocate for more time for certain subjects? Or maybe it's a phase 1 and a phase 2 where we could try to.
I think we just have to be cognizant of the timelines with the associated project. So if there's additional time that's needed, well, that's a committee decision to make at that time. I'm certainly planning to participate in the committees to help sort this out, to make sure that committee members aren't feeling that their time isn't being valuably spent. We want to make sure that there is appropriateness and the referrals as constituted under the terms of reference. And I believe that we're going to get there.
Okay. Taylor?
Yeah, hi, I'm not sure. I hope you guys can hear me. Sorry for not being there tonight. I just wanted to add that that all sounds great, and that sounds like that will set us up moving forward. Obviously, the frustration is that we have been meeting without that kind of mapping and structure in place. So, you know, lesson learned, and maybe we can move forward. But another piece that would be value added would be, you know, more clearly articulating what council is asking and when. Because I feel like we've had some meetings that have basically turned into for our information only, without us really knowing that they were just meant for our information and nothing was meant to be an output. So we're all eager to give something, but the ask and the idea of what is being asked of us and when hasn't necessarily flowed to us to help us shape those kind of for our informations only. So looking forward to moving forward on a better note and being more productive.
Jason, did you want to respond?
I can just add, one of the things that we're doing as a staff is we're looking at our reports that we provide to council with decision points. Here's a decision for council to be made here. Here's another decision point to be made here. And I think it's going to become a lot clearer in terms of where that feedback is looking from. So it's not this omnibus, here's the referral of this. That's not to say that, you know, of the items that council has said that are important for this committee, the 4 items that it's not limited to, but things like the transportation master plan, sewer master plan, stormwater master plan, sustainable infrastructure replacement plan. What we want to show is where those items are going to be coming forward in 2025, and then work back from that to make sure that the committee has the time to be able to provide input to council before they make the decision. So really, it's just making sure that we've got that timing all encapsulated together so that we get the committee's feedback and we keep processes moving forward. That's not to say that the committee couldn't ask for more time on particular matters, or if it falls outside of what those decision points are, that's up to committee. But we do believe it's going to be focused for 2025.
Thank you. And Roger.
Jason, if I'm understanding you correctly, the city just went through the service reviews and the various departments put in what they projected their budget needs were going to be for 2025. So knowing that, then they know the projects that are coming on the pipe. And we will see those projects well in advance before they actually start to get input from us? Or how does that work?
So the way that the terms of reference are created is that council will refer matters to committee. So those matters will come to council early on to say, this is the project we've got. And depending on what that engagement piece looks like with committee, with the public, that needs to be considered very early on in the project. And that's what will be referred back to committee once council's had a chance to see that, refer it with those specific instances of what they want feedback on, which I think will give you more focus than perhaps what it's been in the past. I have looked at some of the previous minutes and some of the things that the committees wanted to do online. And I think it's just a matter of focus. And that's really what our intentional piece is for 2025.
Awesome. All right, not seeing anything else. We'll go back to the tabled item then, which I can't think of off the top of my head.
Master transportation plan.
Transportation master plan.
So I think with that context, through the chair, staff has learned some lessons relative to bringing very broad topics with no asks of this committee. There's been some challenge from our aspect as well. Like, we want to engage this committee. We want to get good feedback from this committee. But some of these topics are very large and complex. So we took the approach of let's educate first and then. And I think that Jason's approach in this updated framework will greatly assist us in bringing these broad topics to council, focus points of discussion. My hope is that even these larger topics like the TMP, if we ever come back with sanitary, whatever that ends up coming from council to this committee, staff will look to try to focus some of these trigger points or these discussion points. And that's not to say that the committee may take further direction and creative license and the rest inside of those meetings, but you'll have that sort of mandate and we can work through that together. And my hope is we can do that inside of a meeting. For the TMP, staff's intention right now is to bring forward what we've brought to this committee. We've taken some feedback already just from that meeting and some of the interactions we've had, lessons learned around how to share that information, what that may look like. We'll likely discuss that with our Chief Administration Officer, Jason, and then look at a plan of how do we bring this to council in an effective way that they can digest and then likely refer to this committee, what that might look like. So we're working right now internally with our consultant group to come up with a plan of how to do that. We need the TMP to move forward to continue our business. And you'll see in my presentation tonight, spoiler alert, there's no request for recommendations. So I apologize again. This is not a meeting that I'm excited about in the sense of, discussing things and troubling things and getting a lot of feedback. It's hopefully the last one where we just do for information only, and the last one where we come without a mandate from council of this is what we want the committee to do. So I apologize in advance. But this is another one of those committee meetings where we're not seeking recommendations. Doesn't mean we can't talk, we can't get feedback from you, but the intent is information only, and I apologize in advance for that. We're looking to restructure. Does that answer your question?
Okay, I think are we complete on that one? All right. Moving on then, we are on to our new business now, 5.1 on our original agenda. I don't know what number we would give it now. I think it's still maybe 5.1 because we'll pretend that the old business was under 4. So we're looking at a summary of our capital and special initiatives projects for the 2025 to 2029 5-year financial plan.
With that, I'll take it over. So Joshua Baylis, Manager of Engineering, City of Colwood. All of you know me, I've spoken to you before. Taylor, hello, online. Yeah, so as I said, apologies in advance. There won't be any sort of requests for recommendations or pieces that we're looking for feedback on. Prior to this restructure, this was really meant to inform, I think it was a request of the committee and a collaboration between our director and really our department in this committee. In the end, here for information, I'll move into the agenda for tonight, which is context setting, and then we'll move into special initiatives for the financial plan, which is our 2025 to 2029 financial plan. We'll go into capital works. I apologize in advance. I completely forgot to add slides on our stormwater infrastructure. So I've got the list of projects with me, but no accompanying slides. So at the end, before we get into pictures, I'll list those off. We can discuss them. If there's any information this committee needs back, I can always circle back with the committee with whatever information is required. We can look at that when it comes. And then really just for fun, I have some pictures of projects we've done recently or that we're working on. Might stir some conversation again. So what we're talking about tonight is really an overview of our service review and budget deliberations that we did with council for the 2025 budget. It's a 5-year window, 2025 to 2029. As I said earlier, and I think Jason may have touched on this, the financial plan went for final reading last night and it got accepted. So we now have an official financial plan for 2025, which is great. It gives us a roadmap and acceptance to start spending and do our work, which is exciting for staff. I already touched on the purpose of tonight, really for information, and I'll just apologize one more time. Context setting continued. We move into engagement goals. I think we've all kind of touched on this already tonight. We are looking to revamp this process and get engagement from a staff level and committee level. How that's going to work is intended to be bring items to council. They give us pointed information to say, okay, go to committee and get this information back. Let's trouble this issue and bring it back with recommendations from that committee. So staff are committed to that process, working with Jason and council to get that project list forward with an idea of which ones could or should go to committee, and then council to direct that, and it filters down into a plan for the year. That kind of captures most of those pieces. The TMP, I wanted to touch on the impact of the TMP. Probably all of you already know this, but it influences so much of what we do in engineering, whether it be developer work or city-driven work. Our cross sections are dictated through that. Our order of projects are dictated through that. And our plan right now is from 2015. Our DCC program and the project list inside of that, the order of those projects is dictated from a 2015 plan. Roger, you talk about timelines and 100-year horizons and 10-year, whatever that might be. We need to continually update these plans, whether the horizon is 100 years or 20 years, things change. So we're cognizant of that, and the importance of that TMP and the other documents that it affects is significant. So you'll notice we won't be covering a lot of active transportation projects because the ATNP, Active Transportation Network Plan, is still in draft. Our goal is to implement that plan inside of our TMP and get full adoption. So then we can look at a capital plan update relative to where are we going to continue to put sidewalks and bike lanes inside of Colwood. Right now, we don't have great direction on that because we're missing the TMP. So staff are really keen to get this continued. We've done a lot of work on it in 24, but 25 is a year we really see as necessary to see this finished. Sorry, I missed a slide. There we go. And one more continuation. We're going to go into special initiatives and Colwood-led projects. So as I said before, that's Colwood-led capital works. And then we also have developer-led capital works. That's just to share that engineering touches both. So we ensure that the quality and our standards are met when developers do work for us. So you'll consider things like Royal Bay, Royal Beach, or Beachland, sorry. Olympic View, those larger master plan communities. When they build roads, we review those specs, the drawings, the designs. We inspect them as they're being built. We inspect them before we take them over, make sure they meet or exceed our standards. So that's part of the work we do. And then we have our in-house Colwood-led projects as well. And then the special initiatives. So I'm touching on most of that there. So our first special initiative inside of the 2025 financial plan, and this is in no particular order, so we'll just go through. Any questions, let me know. But the DCC major update. So in 2023, we did a minor update to that program. That program was implemented in I hopefully said it here. I didn't. I want to say like 2020. At the time, construction costs were really different than they are now, and then they were in 2023. We were finding those projects completely underfunded. The rates at which developers were paying were not sustainable to capture the projects or fund the projects. So the ministry allows you to do a minor update, which is to capture an increase in things like contingency, inflation, construction industry costs, whatever those might be. So we did a full revamp of the program inside of that, you cannot touch scope of work or list of projects. So you can't add new projects, you can't take projects off, but you can increase for construction costs. I see a question.
Okay, sorry about this, Joshua, but this is a pet peeve of mine. The way Colwood does its roads DCCs is non-standard. That road DCC, if you're fronting a major road, all the works property line to property line fall into DCCs. If you're doing it on a local road, you pay DCCs and then you upgrade the frontage to local road standards. That strikes me as incredibly unfair, and in fact is not in accordance with the DCC best practices guide. It says that in a case where a major collector road provides the primary frontage for and access to a land development project, only the oversizing component of the road should be included in the DCC. So at the time the last DCC was brought up, as you said, it was horrendously old and we needed to get something done. My question is, will this update look at whether that's the right way to be calculating DCCs and give some guidance to council on there's options here and which one is preferable? As I said, to me, it's just horribly unfair for guys, the little guy's paying twice basically and the big guy's not.
Thank you for that comment through the chair. We are aware of that. And there's not a workaround. There's a simpler way to do it, which is the way you've described. There's also the DCC credits to give credit for a portion of the work done. I think we will probably land on a recommended structure that you've described. But we will revisit that structure inside of the major update. But the minor one, that couldn't be touched. But we are aware of that inequity or perceived inequity, and that others are not doing it quite the same. Just to continue on that, quickly wrapping it up, in 2026 is the plan to do that work. I would suggest as the TMP ends, and maybe even partially in parallel, this work could and should begin. So there may be some conversation between staff and council around the order of this or the timing of this. But we do see this as really important as soon as we get that finalization of the TMP to start looking at this. Stormwater master plan, similarly, last done in 2018, an update in 2022. We're looking for an update this year. We're just seeing significant changes in the environment and what we're seeing in our storm drainage, not to mention the Allendale lands and Tri-Stone lands and some of our drainage concerns there. And then with this work being done on the master planning efforts, there's also, I guess, a co-benefit of likely having enough information or a little bit more information needed to then leverage that into a storm DCC. So staff are also contemplating that and bringing that forward to council. I'm not following the slides, I'm sorry. I'll try to do better there. Traffic management program. This is an existing program we've had for a number of years now. Temporary in nature is the idea, but we get a phone call about speeding in an area, cut throughs, things like that. We can have that discussion at a staff level, bring it to council, whatever that ends up being. It might be a chicane implementation that's happened on Hatley, Milburn speed bumps, all sorts of different smaller temporary in nature implementations are what this is meant for. Some of those implementations do end up being more permanent in nature, but the intent of this is really pilotish programs, trial things in a neighborhood, and then if we're finding that they're working, we don't usually spend the money to pull them back out. So that's kind of how this one works. TMP, kind of touched on this a few times already, so I won't go too much in detail. We really need to do it in 2025. We'll be looking to bring that to council as soon as possible. Vision Zero. So this one's kind of interesting. It's a multi-step plan. Saanich is really the furthest along in our region with Vision Zero. It's a strategy and or approach that gets applied to your overall transportation network. And the real initiative is to reduce serious injuries, fatalities from vehicular accidents to zero. There's a bunch of different sort of metrics and evaluations, whether it's RCMP, data, ICBC data, hospital data, that all gets evaluated. And then there's a few consultants locally, semi-locally, that work in this area. Staff have brought forward to council the first step, which is pretty minor in nature, and there's some really good grants to support it. We have $20,000 to work on this. There's 2 grants that are both for $20,000 that we are hoping to get to cover this cost altogether. And really it develops a bit of a framework and plan for your community and what Vision Zero will look like, how to get into sort of phase 2, which is getting that assessment all done. And then phase 3 is more around projects and the hierarchy of those projects. So how that fits in with the TMP, even our DCC program or standards that we use, that's still stuff that staff are looking at, but it's pretty well internationally recognized, definitely inside of BC, and then regionally seeming to get a little bit of strength. So we thought we could look at it as well. And through budget process, council agreed. I'll move a little quicker here. So our culvert program used to be bridge and culvert program. Since the implementation of a capital leads for the Parks Department, they took over the bridge component because all the bridges were small in nature inside of parks. If they ever need support, engineering are here to help. Culverts, on the other hand, have stayed with us. Really, it's a large report that's captured all the culverts inside of Colwood. The intent this year is to take that data and put it inside of our GIS and our asset register with the intent of having the inspection periods, replacement periods, and those types of things, the depreciation replacement program, all put into that asset program. So we're just a little bit smarter and more proactive around assets such as culverts. And then that kind of dovetails well into our geotechnical monitoring, which is a similar approach, just a different asset. So our retaining walls and rock structures, were 51 identified inside of Colwood, 3 of which are sort of higher risk or higher consequence, low risk, depending on which one. Those were identified, preliminary design done in 2024. The intent with this budget of 145,000 is to move into detailed design and construction inside of this year to address those 3 main issues. And then the second part to this inside of 2025, again, is to get this into our GIS and asset register. A lot of the other walls have pretty prescriptive inspection programs and periods, some of which are in-house we can handle and some of which we have to hire a consultant to look at. So getting those really inspection test plans and timelines and schedules put into that automated software will be a huge savings for our department and give us clarity on spends moving forward. Lookout Brook Dam, pardon me. Inside of 2024, we owed the ministry a dam safety report. We got that report done and off. It came with a few recommendations and some corrective actions, some of which are required, some are suggested, and some are nice to haves. Most of which staff, well, we agree with all the must haves, and some of the nice to have staff agree with as well. We'll be looking at pricing those. We're just waiting for the inspector of dams to come and do his inspection as part of his review of our report, just to see if there's any further recommendations before we button that all up. But we're fairly confident that the 27,500 will be sufficient to address any concerns, and that will get us another 10-year window before we have to redo this process again. Moving away from special initiatives into capital projects. So really just looking at the preliminary review. Again, as I said before, this is really borrowed from our process of budget deliberations and service review. So a lot of these slides are literally pulled from budget deliberations. So I'll just be sharing that with you. And again, stop me if there's any questions. The next slide here gives the road infrastructure budget summary. I've gone through and put in green the little ENG, which indicates that it's an engineering project. When we did budget deliberations, we showed this summary slide and then had a few accompanying slides where we dove a little deeper on some topics. I'll go through those same slides, then I'll re-show this slide. And if there's any follow-up questions or areas that committee members would like to go into deeper, we can do that. Stuart, do you take your question away? run the math afterwards. Thanks for the feedback. I'll have a look. First project is the Galloping Goose that we focused on with council. This project is still very exciting for staff, even though it's had so many delays and setbacks. A week before last, we received confirmation finally from the CRD that we have approval of the IFC drawings, meaning we can re-engage our design build partner, have them start their procurement or continue their procurement process, look at updating their schedule and mobilization dates. Early discussions with them and continued discussions through our delay process have led us to believe we're not at risk of losing our funding. But we are at risk from a budget standpoint with all the delays that have occurred. Plan right now is to continue working towards starting and getting the project completed, but defining what those delay costs may look like as soon as possible so we can bring that back to council if there are any significant ones. Next one is the intersection at VMP and Carindale. I threw a bit of a wrench in this one during budget deliberations. There's a contemplated change in the cross section for VMP to go from a bike lane and sidewalk on both sides formalized to a multi-use path on one side of the road for the entire run, connecting down to Latoria and connecting back up to slightly off Allendale, those formalized works at Allendale intersection. Reason this is being considered is there's some good case studies in the region and out of this type of application of multi-use path along a parkway or highway to further distance pedestrians and cyclists away from that speed, congestion, noise, everything. And then significant cost savings. There's estimated really early at conceptual stage now, but anywhere from $2 to $3 million considering the entire corridor. So staff right now are working with, again, internally and a consultant to try to define what that might look like at a conceptual level to be able to bring it to the public and ask the question of which side do we want? Is this something we want to consider? Again, this will be going from staff working with Jason to council, and then how's it going to go from council? Is it going to go to committee? Do we go straight to public engagement? What do we look at there? So for this project, that cross section is critical, is desired to get finalized because how that cross section marries up to the intersection and continues through is different depending on which treatment you do. And rather than go out for a design of that intersection, not taking into account that potential change, and then having to do a change order for design and then construction, we'd rather get it buttoned down ahead of time, clean up the terms of reference, get them to design what we want, and move forward. Stuart.
I think you're a cyclist too, Joshua, so you might be moving the conflict from the cars to the cyclists to the pedestrians because you can get going pretty quick coming down that hill. But I guess my question is probably not fair to ask you. It maybe is more for Jason or maybe even Cynthia. I see the funding here some of it comes from the sustainable infrastructure. And I think for later on, there's also sustainable infrastructure funding for the new washroom down at 170 Goldfinch. And I guess I'm wondering how those projects are considered sustainable infrastructure. It's not my understanding of how sustainable infrastructure is supposed to work or is set up for. So I just wonder why that was the funding source on those two.
I think we'd have to get back to you on that question. I can't answer that for you today. I don't have that information. Certainly our chief financial officer will have that and we'll endeavor to have that answered by next committee meeting.
Roger.
So Josh, just wondering, and I'm sure you know all the facts about this, but at Carindale and Veterans Memorial, we're looking at lights again. And yet all through the presentations with the active transportation network plan, it's always traffic calming. We're having to slow cars down to reduce the severity of accidents. Roundabouts are natural for that. And yet here we go again. We have the room in that corridor to put a roundabout in, and yet we're going to put lights in. And lights are not environmentally friendly because you have hundreds of cars every minute sitting there idling. So my question to you, why do we keep considering putting lights in and especially areas where we have room to put a roundabout in. And roundabouts are proven after 9 or 10 years to be cheaper than lights. In other words, lights require maintenance all the time. Roundabouts don't. And Cam River did an extensive study. When I was speaking to the engineers, I said, how much are the costs reduced with fire department, police, and ambulance attending, not having to attend? He said, you know, we didn't even factor that in. So he said that would even lower the cost again to the municipality. So I'm looking at it and saying, here's a golden opportunity, because you're concerned about speeding on Veterans Memorial. When you widen, it's going to get worse. You have a natural, you got to put lights in. Why don't we put a roundabout in?
Thank you for the question. If I may, through the chair. Roger, you're not wrong in many aspects. It is specific to which sites we're at and the application. So a lot of roundabouts is about balance. And we've looked at that area relative to the right of way we do have. We have a lot of width on the VMP side. We don't have a lot of width on the Carindale side. I think we have 20 meters. We also have some topography changing. The grade is shifted there. So, and it's not just that, it's also the balance and then the amount of pedestrians that are crossing between. Pedestrian crossings, while safer from an aspect of collision likelihood and death or damage, are lower in terms of consequence on a roundabout, but there's a lot of volume of pedestrians crossing at that area. And when that happens through a roundabout, it really slows it down. So, and it's not to say that today that might be a feasible solution. It's about the long term. And we have a full memo that we've had done. So I guess all I would say to that is we are taking a roundabout first approach on all intersections. We're looking at that. I think the ministry's endorsed that approach. Colwood has unofficially endorsed it as well. There's nothing from council to say like you must do that or a committee recommendation. But when we approach any intersection, we look at what would be the best suit. We hire a consultant because we don't have any traffic engineers on staff. And we trouble that, and we have them draft a memo, and we do a matrix of decision making and what works and what doesn't and why it would or wouldn't work. And this one was really clear, and we can certainly look to if council were to direct us to bring that back and the justification for it. So far, we've brought forward this as a signalized intersection and haven't had any questions back from council. If that were to shift and we wanted to dive deeper into that, we've just shared that we've done the assessment and council has endorsed that. We've also done some discussions through our VMP and the hydro works. There was some subsidiary conversations around what's going to happen at that intersection, and people being able to. This would work for a roundabout either way, but they want a higher standard of control at that intersection. So a lot of questions were asked, and a lot of people gave us their anecdotal feedback of what would work and what would fit there, and it aligned with what that memo came back with, which was a signalization. So I don't mean to take away from your comments. I think they're super valid, and we need to take them seriously and look at it. And then when the professionals come back with their feedback to say, this is a scenario where it doesn't make the most sense for these various reasons. I don't have them handy right now, other than the ones I've spoken to, but we certainly do have technical backup to suggest that what we're putting forward here is the right solution.
Thank you. Just checking for hands online as well. And we're good. Carry on.
So I'll continue. Yeah, intent on this one, depending on how TMP goes and engagement on the cross section, we will be going to design RFP as soon as possible, leveraging that into design and then construction as soon as possible. Right now, high level, it's anticipated we may be able to start construction inside of 2025 and look to complete in 2026. Very similar project, same area, really the widening of VMP from Carindale back into Allendale. This one right now is envisioned for design inside of 2025. So we'd be leveraging that same consultant doing the intersection, doing the linear works back to Allendale. And then this would really be a shelf-ready project that could be looked at for a future year. Right now it's earmarked for 27, 28. That could shift with the TMP. We could literally have the shelf ready and do it much later. We could bring it up. It's just, that's what the plan is right now. road infrastructure. This is a transportation safety initiatives, new for this year. One of the things that staff were finding with council and the public and a lot of the calls and concerns that come up in the community were we need sidewalks, we need a crosswalk, we need this crosswalk to now be lit. All these different things come up. And we have our traffic calming policy, and we've tried to come up with an evaluation for that. And we have a policy that it works, generally speaking. But other communities have matrices that really evaluate a bunch of different criteria, give a rating, and then we can put these calls through that matrix and help understand, okay, which one needs to be done soonest? Which one has the highest severity? Which one are we needing to consider today versus tomorrow? So we've built that matrix. I spoke to this a few weeks ago at a council meeting as well. And we're looking to bring that matrix and sort of the framework of which how we built it, why we built it, the pros and cons and how it can be implemented, and bringing that to council. This budget is really to capture those types of projects. So council can then see the matrix, see the project list and say, okay, we agree with that one. We want to do this one and bring those forward. And then they can bring their projects and we can put them into that matrix to help ground truth. Is it just, are we hearing from one person multiple times? Are we getting, anecdotal feedback that people are doing 70 when they're really doing 50? We can get data to support these decisions. And now we have funding to do that. Instead of every time it's council direction with a financial amendment and it's complex and cumbersome for administration and council, we can now bring this forward efficiently, get clarity on, is it legitimate? How do we want to action it? How are we going to fund it? This is that program. Transit improvements.
Sure. Sorry, we just had one more question there.
Sorry, Josh. It's actually the previous one for the Carindale and BMP. It's just a very quick question. When the widening is going to be put in place 27, 28, will the investigation and design decisions on the VMP and Souk significantly impact how that is going to work between Allendale and Souk Road? Because it's 4 lanes there now, but there was conversation about having a roundabout at some point at the VMP and Souk intersection. Will that significantly impact any of the decisions made going up to Carindale?
Through the chair, no.
No?
I'm trying to think of locations here now. So that is upstream of where we're talking about. So no,
Yeah.
it will not impact that at all.
Okay.
No,
Just
and
think-
we're actively working with the ministry on that and excited to continue that in 25 as well, just for a little plug.
Okay.
The roundabout at Souk and BMP. Thank you.
And if I may, just because we were talking about lights and improvements, we had 3 intersections. I believe 2 of them were on Souk Road where we were upgrading the traffic signals to ones that could be more responsive to what's happening with the traffic. Has that been finished, complete?
Yeah, completely finished. We're still working with some of the features and some of the data collection and manipulation that we can do. But the features around when a red light occurs and how long they hold green for is being implemented. And we're able to see that data and that change. We're just trying to figure out how to bring the before and after and share those compare contrast. But basically it reduces your red light running. I think it was by like 70-something% is what we saw in the first week. And the other thing it does that even if someone does continue through the intersection, that cross conflict, they won't get green until that car that's identified as running a red continues right through the intersection. Then the intersection says, okay, it's safe to go green for the other movement. So it's incredibly powerful from a reduction of consequence and injury and sort of liability and damage and all those types of things. It isn't as effective as like a traffic calming or slowing. People can still speed, it just reacts to it. It doesn't hinder it, which is, we were hoping for a little bit of like a punitive measure where they might get a red because they're doing 70. They can do that. There's no one in, I think maybe Canmore might have tried it, but no one else in Canada that we're aware of is doing it. They do it in the States. We were concerned with some of the liability associated with that, and we haven't pursued it. But the safety features are really neat, and what we're seeing there.
Great. I think the certainly council will be interested to hear more about that, but committee would really benefit from hearing how that works, just from that safety standpoint. Roger.
Josh, from what I've seen you presenting so far, I have to ask this question. It's a chicken and egg question. What comes first, the active transportation network plan or the master transportation plan? Because what I've seen here, and even with safety, it looks like we are putting in a lot of things without having a master transportation plan finalized. For instance, these bus shelters. There's a new one just gone in at the end of Painter.
Mhm.
We're going to spend the money powering it, putting a shelter over it, and then that'll probably have to be removed when we 3-lane Machosen Road. So to me, we're putting the cart before the horse. Maybe we should finalize a master transportation plan before we look at the capital program for infrastructure, et cetera, transit lanes, et cetera, because the sidewalks, for instance, we just put down on Machosen Road by Ben Homer down to Royal Bay, those will probably have to be ripped out too to get the width. So we're spending money and then having to redo it. To me, because we have it backwards, we should have a master transportation plan first established, then bring in these other programs. This is a comment I'd like to make. Thank you.
Thanks through the chair, if I may. I think that's one of the toughest things we have to deal with in municipal work and infill work. At the time of, so let's use the Machosen sidewalks as an example. Those were, I believe, a contemplated project from 2017. So our master plan at that time was 2 years old. By the time that got through design and construction, I think they were built in 2020, maybe even sooner, 2019, if I recall correctly. So from that standpoint, they feel really fresh. It's only 5-6 years old. How are we going to move them? At the time when we were contemplating putting them in, we were working off of a brand new TMP. So it's really hard. Like I can sit here right now and tell you we really need our 2025 TMP because it's going to influence our future work. A lot of the work we're going to talk about over the next 3 years is going to be built in 3 years after that, and then we're going to be referencing that as an old TMP. So it's really hard. Like we feel like that point at which, when can we not rely on the TMP anymore? We do have a TMP. We have a 2015 TMP. We have an ATMP that's adopted in draft to be used for master planning purposes and to hold developers to account. So we have some guidance. We just start to get nervous around continuing to invest in things like you mentioned, Owen and Ben Homer. We're now putting a pause on that at a staff level. We haven't brought anything else forward from the ATNP for those projects because we know we're so close with the TMP update and the implementation of the ATNP inside of that. To speak to the bus shelters, that's a grant program where we spend pennies on the dollar to get a shelter. We did bring that to council. We've discussed the location. We put it as far back as we could to not hinder the arbutus tree, the one that you're speaking to specifically at Painter. We do feel that a 3-laning scenario could still work there. We did as much sort of preemptive work as we could to make sure that that was in the best location with the best chance. But on a capital project that we're going to be looking at on Machosen Road for the widening, we're going to be in the millions. And to move that's going to be maybe $10,000. So just a drop in the bucket relative to having a safe location for people to stand and wait for the bus for 5-6 years. Could be 10, could be 20. We don't know how long, but that at the time felt like a reasonable investment to make and decision to make with the information we had at hand on that day. So it's not blind. I take your point. We have a similar frustration relative to working on older master plans. There's always that discomfort as you sort of roll through into the new iteration of it. When do we stop using that? When do we continue to use it? It's a fine balance for sure. And it's not lost on us. We are working on that for sure.
Just to follow up on that.
Okay.
Am I on?
There we go.
Just to follow up on that. I think you were here when myself and several other people sat out in the audience and begged for city to put sidewalks right to the property line.
Mhm.
And we were told, no, we couldn't do it. That arbutus tree you're talking about, which is a beautiful tree, I went and measured it, and there's 5 feet between the property line and with 6 inches of clearance for the arbutus tree. So that sidewalk could easily have gone on the inside, but we insisted on putting it on the outside. Now it'll have to be removed. And that's the frustration I find, that we're using the active transportation network plan to drive the master transportation plan, and it's biting us in the butt. And it's about time we start, and the council gave directions that they wanted the sidewalks put to the property line. So then if it's to the property line, that's where it is, and the room left over is what we've got to work with. And maybe we have to look, instead of taking the golden standard for the active transportation plan, and in certain areas, the sidewalk doesn't have to be 2 meters wide. Maybe it could be 1.7. Maybe the bike lane could be 1.5. Maybe the separation could be 0.5. But we keep this standard going, and it's limiting the flow of traffic, which I think, and I listen to what you're saying about the public wanting. All I'm hearing the public say, they want to be able to get to work in a reasonable time. And that doesn't mean slowing traffic down. That means keeping traffic flowing. And we seem to be at odds all the time with what we're doing and the results we're getting. And for me, it's very, very frustrating. Anyway, I know you or people are doing your best, but it is really frustrating to see. You know, when I was a young guy going to university, my chosen road at one point was 50 miles an hour, and the top part was 40. Well, now we're 40 kilometers and 30 kilometers, and we're still having accidents. So if you really want to stop accidents, make the speed limit 15 kilometers an hour. It's not practical. We know that. So what do? It doesn't matter what you slow these vehicles down to, we're going to have accidents. You can't stop stupidity. So I think the object here is, for me anyway, is to make sure traffic flows. I'm not saying it has to be fast, but it has to flow. And when you start putting lights and everything in, you add frustration to people. And that's where, if you slow them down in one area, they're going to speed up in another area. So it means we're going to have traffic calming on everything. Speed bumps, speed dips, chicanes, etc. We'll never solve it. So I think the best thing to do is be practical and keep the flow going. Thank you. Sorry about my frustration.
No, through the chair, Roger, I hear your frustration. I would just say that staff utilize council's direction on these things, and we have a hierarchy in our OCP around transportation, pedestrian, cyclist, cars. And I think that OCP is being revisited. Our strategic initiatives and strategic plan are being redone. But that's what staff use to guide how we work. Now, the voice of this committee and a single committee member, valuable, good insight, and you speak for, it sounds like, a number of people in the community. We take that feedback and we take it seriously. I don't want to get too much into the specifics of now, like I have a rebuttal. I'm not going to go into it with what we did with that bus stop. It doesn't matter. I'll just say that we are aware of the resolution from council to put sidewalks at property line. We are working with that resolution, and in accordance with that resolution, it talks about coming back to council if we make a change. For all the active transportation projects. We have deviated from that, and we've come back to council. So Lagoon Road, sidewalks in areas have been narrowed, as you described, to 1.5 meters instead of 2. They've come off of property line to save a tree. We've shown that alignment to council. We've got buy-in from council. Kelly Road, Hagel Road, there's all little instances where that's occurred. So we are trying to balance that active transportation lens, traffic flow lens. And like I said, it's not an easy role to play, but all of these engagement pieces and the feedback we receive influence the decisions we make, but ultimately council gets to make that decision, and we give information and they make decisions. So I think you have a seat at the table. Your voice is being heard. Outcomes might not always align with what you personally want or what you see in the community, but hopefully reflective of the committee and what comes back to council, and then council makes the decision. So I'll just share that and maybe continue. If you have any more feedback, please let me know. This
And
was
you
our
can run
transit.
for council and you could still have a different opinion than what's approved, so.
Also not an easy role. Transit improvement. So this is, as Roger alluded to, the bus shelter. So we have a program where BC Transit, it's a grant program. You apply for it. We've applied, I don't know how many years actually, but the last 2 years that I've been here, we've been successful in obtaining 2 new shelters every year. Colwood has to basically put down a pad, bring electricity to it and hook it up, but they provide the shelter and any shelter. So if we have rider counts to justify, you know, the T9 versus the T3, we can apply for whichever one we want with justification and statistical analysis. So we've been doing that for, this will be our 3rd year. We were successful this year. Now we just have to work out through counts and ridership where that's going to go. But we're getting great feedback from the community. This is really appreciated, and we're seeing that. So we feel good about this program moving forward. Suk and Machosen, I think we've sort of peripherally talked about this a few times. This project, through the model and everything else, we see this as from a staff level, a really important project. One of the reasons we brought this forward for a 2026 budget, I think it's 2026. We want to have this designed and ready so that it can be shelf ready if the widening of Machosen at that section comes to fruition through the TMP and council. So we brought this forward as a budget ask to explore it, conceptual design, detailed design, and have it ready and waiting in the hopper. There's some land acquisition pieces, obviously the design of the 4-laning back up Chosen, 4-laning continuation on Suk. All of that needs to come to fruition, but this piece can be designed and be shelf ready and ready to go. And staff feel that's an important aspect. And then not to mention, we can also be able to apply for grants to lower the cost burden on the taxpayer for a project like this. So I'll bring back my original list of capital projects. Any with a green ENG that anybody wants to dive into a little bit more with detail, please let me know. Don't make me do math again.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, after this.
I just wanted to ask you for the bridge renewal program. You mentioned earlier that the bridge and culvert program was mostly in parks. I guess our biggest liability bridge, I guess it's kind of in a park at Esquimalt Lagoon, but also Colwood Creek Park Bridge is also an important one. It's kind of a weird one. It's at the end of the road. It is within the park, but they do bring public works service vehicles over it, so it still has the same standards. And then there's a few others, but they were always big ticket items. So I'm just wondering where we're at with our bridge renewal program.
Yeah, so bridge renewal program has pretty much exclusively, not pretty much, it's been exclusively detailed to Lagoon Bridge. Lagoon Bridge, we did a report last year through 2024 funding, gave us our basically roadmap to maintain the loading rating for that bridge. All of those works shy of 1 pile cap sleeve were completed inside of 2024. I think weather permitting, it's like the next week or so, that last component will be done, and that will close out our 2024 program. You'll notice in here we have 550,000 earmarked for 2028. That is the remaining maintenance works that are not required to maintain the loading, but required to maintain the bridge. So those capital works will be done in a separate phase in 2020. What did I just say? 2028. I think I misspoke before. And then we roll into in 2029 a redo of our assessment. Every 5 years we have to redo that assessment, structural analysis assessment, and then they usually come with a suite of project. So the question that always comes up is, how long are we going to maintain this bridge for? What are we going to do? So that every time we bring that forward, that's another point at which council can make a decision.
And the bridge is still currently maintained, capable of conveying the fire truck over it, correct?
Yeah, for now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a bone of contention for years. I just wanted to touch base on it because, you know, in the event of natural disasters and whatnot, it was our evacuation route. Even, although it may be also impacted, but perhaps not. It just depends what sort of a disaster occurs. And just wondering, will the pedestrian overpass, once we finally get that built, also be on our radar for renewal over time?
That's a great question, Councillor Day. Currently, we're in active discussions with the CRD. I believe our latest is that the CRD will take over ownership and maintenance of that bridge post-construction.
Which would be great because it is their trail, not
Yeah.
ours.
I don't want to misspeak, but I think the agreement we've actually got for even the construction speaks to the future agreement to hand that over as an asset to the CRD.
Great. Oh, all right, Taylor. Sorry, I missed you.
No, no problem. This is just a bit of a broader curiosity of mine. If in anything, when we're talking about, you know, the discussions about signalization or roundabouts and active transportation and road widening and traffic flow and all this stuff, something that just seems to be missing from the city's conversation is maybe the idea of pedestrian overpasses. So I'm just thinking about veterans and Karen down there, right? It sounds like one of the major drivers is because of the amount of pedestrians that seek to cross there to make it signalized. But we also know that that's one of our main roads, and as we've started into the discussion of the TMP, we're one of the considerations is, hey, maybe we widen BMP and we make that a main arterial road. And so if we're doing that and we're then throwing signals on it as well, that kind of seems counterproductive. So I was just wondering, you know, has the city ruled out the idea of considering pedestrian overpasses in critical spots, such as along Veterans and such as along Machosen Road, you know, notably around Sangster there, and because that kind of seems to alleviate a couple of things, which is get traffic flowing, but also keep people safe.
Yeah, if I may, through the chair. Thanks, Taylor, for that question. Certainly not ruled out. I would say at this stage, it's tricky to answer that. The volume at which a pedestrian overpass for a city like Colwood to take that as a capital investment is significant. The analysis we do with signalization, like signalized intersections can still flow incredibly effectively. And they also produce breaks in traffic so that people can come onto VMP and off of VMP, and I'll speak specifically about VMP, breaks in traffic for the roundabout downstream. So it's taking a network approach and looking at suitability of treatment inside of that area. I mean, if money weren't an issue, I think, yeah, we would be putting pedestrian overpasses at every significant intersection, not to mention, you know, Aldine and Souk for the Galloping Goose and Kelly and Souk for the Galloping Goose. And those would probably be our first two places just to keep that connectivity for the Galloping Goose and the regional trail and have that be more of a commuter trail or a more effective commuter trail. But yeah, I mean, I take your point for sure. I think we would look at traffic volumes, and it's probably some metrics we can explore. But no, I wouldn't say that it's top of mind, and I also wouldn't say we've written it off as something we wouldn't consider if given the opportunity.
An idea was floated many years ago on VMP to join the two Havenwood parks with an overpass because there's rocky outcrops on both sides. But at that time, it wasn't something we could consider financially. It just wasn't within the realm of possibility. Roger. I'm trying to do Roger. This doesn't like my fingers for some reason. There we go.
Josh, just two questions. On the active transportation counter implementation, I'm delighted that you're buying more counters. But is that just for pedestrians or does that give an analysis of traffic? In other words, McElhaney did one for us on Hatley. And they could tell what vehicles were making left-hand turns, which were making right, how many pedestrians, single axle trucks versus double axle trucks. They gave a really comprehensive. Do our counters do the same thing, or is it just strictly counting pedestrians?
Thanks for the question through the chair. It depends on the counter. So this line item that you're speaking to or asking about is our eco counters, which is a pedestrian and cyclist predominant counter. They have, and we have purchased 2 other counters that we put on Wishart that also count, and actually VMP that also count traffic. So cars, trucks, motorcycles, and differentiates between the 3. Movements it doesn't do, but our new signal cameras do. And certain counters that we have, if used in concert, so the radar, I can't remember the name of the manufacturer, but we have, I believe, 3 of them now. And they're mobile counters. We can set them up and get data. We've done it on Latoria to prove out the pre and post speed reduction implementation there. To complement our matrix, we put them up when we get a complaint. We have sort of a rolling list of areas we go, and then we return to get baseline and return counts. So we do have a lot of technology there. McElhaney's they probably use similar counters and some of the same tech. That's a pretty decent investment to do a focus point like that. With so many, not complaints, interest points in our community, we find we try to do that 2-week window and spread that counter throughout the community. And then we have quite an array of counts that we manage and track. But to answer your question, that line item is not intended to be traffic counts. It's meant to be to give us baseline data, continued data around ridership and mode shift. And this line in particular is for the installation only of our last 2 counters, which was part of a grant we got in 2022 for eco counters, where we got a large grant where they paid 60% of the purchase and installation of these eco counters. I believe we got 9, of which 2 were totem style. So they're massive totems. They tell you the weather and have a nice Colwood logo. 1 will be installed in concert with the Galloping Goose overpass, and the other one we're working with Langford right now about trying to find a location to put it at Kelly and VMP, so that Galloping Goose entrance into Colwood to get better counts of who's coming into our community through that mode of transportation.
Okay, thank you. My final question is the park and ride on Ocean Boulevard. There's a lot of equipment going in there right now. Is that for the preliminary work for the overpass?
No, thank you for the question through the chair again. That's a BC Hydro supercharger program. So the chargers that are currently there, they're expanding that. I don't know if you were at that council meeting or not, where council opened up that agreement to allow for further infrastructure installation and even a phase 2 to put even more chargers there. And from that came our Quarry Park project, where they put the chargers down in Royal Bay South. Those chargers are actually up and running right now. I actually drove by today and there was a Tesla charging. This is just the start of the park and ride chargers being installed. They should be 3-4 weeks and out of there, everything done.
I think maybe the brand of the counter you were thinking of is the Blue Toad.
No.
No.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, through the chair, Blue Toad's another manufacturer of a different, and that's trip-to-trip Bluetooth counting. So from intersection to intersection, you put that infrastructure, it scans your unique Bluetooth on your cell phone or anything that puts out a Bluetooth signal, and it'll tell you travel times. So we use that to give, sort of like if you put your location of where you want to go in Google Maps, it'll tell you it's going to be 12 minutes to 14 minutes. You can go on Colwood website. It doesn't actually work right now, which is kind of a bummer, but it can tell you your anticipated trip time based on the Blue Toad data that's being supplied. Yeah, staff are actively looking at that subscription right now, because the price of any subscription through IT of any kind seems to have doubled, if not tripled, in the last couple of years. Yeah, so like we have a CAD subscription, a Bluebeam subscription, multiple subscriptions, and all of which are getting very, very expensive. So we'll probably be returning to council with bit of a recommendation on the blue toad.
Well, it's good that we're doing a value for money
Yeah.
dive and bringing that information back. So that's always good to hear. All right, over to you.
Okay. So this is the part where I admitted I forgot an entire scope of work. Drainage inside of Colwood. So we have inside of our financial plan every year, we're supposed to do a significant project. I don't have it up here for you. 2025, the plan is Cecil Blog, rerouting, design, and construction. So that's the Souk Road to Cecil Blog. We have known failures like no bottom to the pipe, culvert issues, realignment. So it's not a right of way through private property. All of that's encompassed in that project for 2025. 2026 is Kelly Road Culvert design and construction. Design in 26, construct in 27. And then 2028 is Island Highway design and construct in 2028 as well. And 2029 I did not grab. I apologize. But that's sort of an overview of, we have our master plan for storm. We have all the capital projects listed in that plan, and we brought forward through the budget deliberations process. I just didn't grab the drainage summary. I only grabbed the road summary. I apologize. But that's what highlights those projects.
Maybe what you could do is send that out by email to committee members, as this is a learning session for all of us.
Certainly, I can do that.
Stu?
Joshua, one of the great natural advantages that Colwood has is the gravelly soils and the permeability of those things. And how much are you integrating design solutions into in-ground disposal of stormwater as opposed to piping and culverting? And specifically, probably we're talking Allendale and Patterson Pits.
Yeah, significantly. So I would say development wise, our SDS bylaw puts infiltration high on the list. They have to do a test and prove it out and make sure it works. Similarly, when we look at sort of a master planning exercise in Allendale and the Tri-Stone, that's exactly what we're looking at. It's hydrogeology, geology, and making sure that, you know, those natural assets are being utilized, because we do have, the tricky part is making sure that we don't overutilize and then get daylighting downstream that we weren't, that snowball effect. Some of the reports we've been reviewing, not to get too much in the weeds, but if you go over to Two Waters, there's some claims that that daylighting is caused from some of the infiltration that we're, the over infiltration that we're doing upstream of that. Can that be proven out? We have some reports that infer that. We're not totally sure yet. So there's a worry not to take too liberal an approach to that, or liberal, whatever. We don't want to be too confident in the infiltration, but we want to be realistic and not over design our formalized systems when we have that natural asset at our disposal. So I would say we're looking to strike a balance, but not lose sight of the fact that Colwood is unique and that we can and should be infiltrating stormwater as much as possible. When it comes to a lot of these projects, this is really replacement or increase of capacity of already formalized systems. We're not typically going into, most of these projects are not like a ditch being formalized. It's a culvert that has failed, or a pipe that has failed. Yeah.
And do you work with soils maps to determine those pathways?
Yeah, really high level, we would in-house, but primarily that would be contracted out to a consultant. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, Roger has a
Oh,
question.
sorry. Roger.
One second. There we go.
Josh, I think this is great. Thank you very much. But how much of an impact, as an example, does BC Transit play in this? In other words, and I think it was Councillor Day who asked the question when BC Transit about 2 years ago made a presentation about the new bus lane they were putting in. And it was from 6 Mile Bridge up to Colwood Corners. And they were going to take out the slip lane on Ocean Boulevard. And the presenter from BC Hydro, when Councillor Day asked the question, I think was pretty poor. He said, "Oh, we have no problem with that." So transit had no problem with it, but how about the residents in the city? So my question is, can BC Transit basically do anything they want along that corridor without input from Colwood? Or do we have to agree that they could take out the slip lane to accommodate one bus coming out from the military housing in Belmont? So I'd like to know, because that's one pressure relief point that a lot of people rely on to get into town. If they take that out, that's going to create gridlock in that area. So I just wanted to know, can they do it without the city's permission?
Short answer through the chair. No, BC Transit cannot. That is our right of way. That project is done in collaboration with Colwood. We reviewed all those drawings. I want to give you bad news or good news here, but that change of removing the slip lane was actually a comment from city staff to bring that intersection into a more modern design style and specification. So there's an analysis done, and we engineering have recently asked BC Transit to come forward with that project because there's been such significant delay, and revalidate the data associated with the viability or necessity of that project from a BC Transit perspective, but also the effect of it on a sort of vehicle transportation effect on our community. So BC Transit is actively working on that, and I'm working with Jason and Corporate Services to find a time when we can bring that report forward to council. Whether that gets referred to committee or not, I don't know. But the intent there is to really make sure that, because I want to say it's 3+ years since that was sort of contemplated, significantly more since it was contemplated, but 2 years since construction's been talked about. And that data has changed. We have more cars on the road. We have more buses on the road. So we want to revisit that data and make sure that that project is still necessary in the way that it was envisioned at that time. We don't anticipate any changes, but we want to bring that forward to council and get reacquainted and sort of re-bought in on that project.
And I was just, I'm going to give it to Dawn, but I just wondered, are you using the traffic model to validate that?
Yeah, the data from the traffic model, certainly from a network standpoint and level of service of the intersection, yeah, we could give them some data back. They have specific counts, and then we'll analyze that intersection probably more deeply than our high-level model would. But if they needed any inputs from us, we certainly would share that, yeah.
Just, I think if this committee does get to look at things like that, it would be very beneficial to see the model running what you're saying.
Thank you. Just a question to Josh. If I remember correctly, we also, within our scope, is the wastewater management plan as well. Is there anything going on? I don't remember seeing anything in the documentation here for capital projects. There's nothing going on this year for wastewater or waste?
Yeah, through the chair, if I may. That's a great question. We have a resolution from council, pardon me, to bring back as part of our 2023 or 2022 sanitary master plan, a sewer expansion network philosophy plan, whatever that might be. We've had a workshop with council on that topic. It's a big, meaty topic that staff are trying to wrap our heads around and best gift council technical knowledge. And then it really becomes what's best for the community. And that's what council gets to decide they represent the community. So you're not wrong. There's a complete absence of capital works relative to sanitary sewer in the Colwood-led capital program. Now, development-wise, we're dealing with sanitary expansion all over the place. And we're reviewing those and making sure they meet our standards and getting installed, reviewed, all that stuff. Inside of currently owned Colwood streets and expanding that network, we're not actively doing anything because we haven't got a budget endorsed or a program endorsed from council through that work yet. So inside of 2025, we intend to bring that back, not through a workshop, but another means to council, and try to bring that forward to fruition, whatever that might be. The disposition could be stay with what we're doing now, which is a developer-led expansion. It could be a more proactive approach where we approach neighborhoods, and then the funding structure and sort of forcefulness. There's a scale inside of that as well. So a ton of information and work to go through that plan. But short answer is nothing in this financial plan period for expansion. Only upgrades on pump stations and any kind of enhancement work on the linear network. There is nothing until right now. It's planned for 2045, but that could shift closer or later. That's the only linear expansion that we need, or enhancement, I should say.
Okay, so it's really all of just the maintenance of the existing
Mhm.
network is all that's going on right now.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So Josh, there are a number of homes being ad hoc added onto the systems.
Yep.
In fact, council sort of is lagging, I think, a little behind in when we actually approve those bylaws, but for necessary reasons. I'm not suggesting anything's wrong, but perhaps it would be a good idea to have, either an annual or a semi-annual kind of catch up of where we're at, how many new sewer connections are added, and how that affects our system as a whole, because I think that's where people are interested in keeping an eye on how we're doing on
Yeah.
sewers.
Thanks for that comment. I would say the service review is when that data is given to council. That's not to say that that couldn't be repeated or shared elsewhere. Now, the specificness of that data, like we don't meter each home relative to their sanitary discharge into our network, but there's inferences and standards of flow rates based on individual homes. So you could start to do some quick math to look at the effect. Our counts for connecting existing Colwoodians to our network are decreasing every year. Now the connections based on development are staying very strong.
Of course. Yeah. Just looking to make sure I didn't miss anybody. Good.
So done storm, just going to pictures now. So we can go through this quickly. You can make me pause, whatever you want to do, and ask questions. Top left is the double roundabout, fully done, Latoria and VMP. Bottom left is Owens Road sidewalk project, so a couple years old now. We're getting nothing but positive feedback after these projects are installed. Moms with strollers, people walking their dogs, whatever it might be. We're getting a lot of anecdotal feedback from community members, public works working in the area. Just, hey, we love this thing. Like it's really great to see. While that is some of the most challenging work we do, it's afterwards some of the most rewarding. Hagel Road, similar type project, just on Hagel Road, that's bottom right. This is now into Royal Bay. So this would be some of the new active transportation infrastructure. So this is one of the more complex bus stops integrating with a bike lane and sidewalk, and how we do crossings and some of that active transportation accessibility confluence. So both pictures here in Royal Bay. And we move to Whale and Wilford on the top left. This is the first diagonal crossing that will for sure in Colwood and that we're aware of in the West Shore. Not getting really much feedback period on this one, negative or positive. I think users of the Goose, we've heard a little bit. But I think the positive from our standpoint is that we're not getting a bunch of complaints from a traffic, like vehicle standpoint. There's a lot of concern from some of the businesses on Wilford. We've got, I don't know if it's For Fuel or the other competing company, but there's some decent industry down there with tractor trailers coming in and out, deliveries to Lee Valley and things like that. And we worked a lot with them on turning movements and making sure this would work. And so far it's been working well. Some really unique signal timing sheets implemented here to allow for the diagonal crossing, but not to hinder the right turn movement. Like it was just a really neat confluence. And at a staff level, we aren't transportation engineers or traffic engineers, but we got to learn a lot and work on this one. So pretty proud of that implementation. We talked a bit about Lagoon Bridge. This is a 2022 photo, but we do have some more from some more recent ones as well. Just again, some of that preventative maintenance and upkeep to make sure we keep that loading. The chosen Latoria intersection, you'll see now if you go down there, the Beachlands Boulevard component or fourth quadrant of that intersection is now being formalized. So they've come to the table. We've got funding for this year to do that portion of the DCC project, which is the final leg of this intersection. Talked a bit about the eco counter. So top left is the proof from them of like the printout vinyl that'll be on our totem eco counter. So that's what will be standing at the that'd be the northwest end of the Galloping Goose Bridge. You'll see that totem standing there counting you as you walk or cycle by, and it might tell you what the weather is too. Who knows? Bottom left, that was the ped counter on Machosen Road. So you can't even really, oh, sorry, this is the countdown timer. So at Machosen Road, we used to just have the stop hand. Now we have the countdown timers. We're looking at just little sort of accessibility pieces to that and safety components on our intersections. Another upgrade, if you saw the funding line for 2025, the Goldstream and Island Highway intersection, we're looking at updating the push buttons to a audible and wave so that they're more accessible. Right now they're the actual push button with no audible. So just little touches that we have high pedestrian counts there. There's no reason that we shouldn't have features like that at intersections that are so, well, really any intersection that's new, and then older ones with high pedestrian counts need to be upgraded. And then top right is the eco counter installed at the top of Painter Trail before you drop into Royal Bay. So that's kind of a bit of, Roger, you're asking about what those counters are. That's what they look like. And that is a wrap on tonight's presentation. Again, apologies in advance, really looking to engage this committee in a more meaningful and collaborative way as we move forward with sort of recommendations, or I should say referrals from council down to this committee. I agree with the sentiments. I think Stuart said it well, and Roger as well. There's some smart minds here with some really good opinions, and we want to hear them. And I think that we do ourselves a disservice by doing what I just did and just trying to educate you or share with you information. We need to come back with more pointed, clear asks and topics, and I think we can do a lot better in the next 2 years. So thank you.
Josh, sorry, just a very quick question on the to make this right, Machosen and Latoria intersection. Is there going to be a sidewalk and bike lane all the way up to the top of the top of the hill, the same as it is on the other side that's already been developed? And that's part of the developer's requirements?
Yes.
Okay. I was just specifically asked, is there someone who rides up that on a daily basis that I work with, and he asked why it wasn't done. I said, well, I'm pretty sure it's because they were gonna have the developer do it, but.
Yeah, so the component, I guess I should be careful. If you're asking anything about timeline, I can't share that with you right now. The frontage for the presentation center. So you'll probably go down there and see a formalized curb right now.
Yeah.
I think that goes a little past property line, but they're only obligated as they subdivide to do their property frontage. But Beachlands, similar to Royal Bay, for economy of scale and the rest, they sometimes will go further. So I'd have to go back and look at our plan specifically, but obligation wise and cross section wise, yes, bike lanes and sidewalks up the entire way for Beachlands Boulevard. Timing of which and when that'll be completed, unknown right now, but the first, I don't know, few hundred meters will be done.
Okay, thank you.
Shortly. Yeah.
Roger.
Josh and Jason, I want to thank you very much. I feel moving forward, the process that you're going to introduce will make this committee more valuable and I think a very positive step forward. So thanks to the both of you, at least from my point of view, and I think probably for the rest of the committee as well. So good on you. Thank you.
Great. Great. I think that brings us to the end of our items on our agenda. So make sure you have a donut before you go. And we'll see you at our next meeting. Jason, do you have off the top of your head when our next scheduled is, or Marcy? April 10th or something like that?
Well, that's a good question. Will we see the 2025 projects at the next session? Yeah, that's the intention. Perfect.
Okay. You could join virtually. Oh, well, that might be very difficult. Yes, I do.
Move to adjourn.
April 8th. There you go. That was just moved by Roger. Yeah. Sorry, too many conversations going on at the same time. Thanks, everybody.